Shri Yudapada Shri Guru Vishnuvanscha
Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatha Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhano Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Mukam karoti vachalam pangum langayate girim yat kripata maham vande Shri Gurum Dinataranam. So the translation again, people in general are not very advanced in knowledge by which to discriminate between religion and irreligion. The innocent, unenlightened citizen is like an ignorant animal sleeping in peace with its head on the lap of its master, faithfully believing in the master's protection. If a leader is actually kind-hearted and deserves to be the object of a living entity's fate, how can he punish or kill a foolish person who has fully surrendered in good faith and friendship? So we are discussing here, sorry by the way if it's again me, but we'll get into schedule from tomorrow. So we're discussing this principle of leadership. It is important, and one of the most fundamental principles of leadership is to give a protection. That is one of the meanings of kshatriya. Kshat means to give protection. And if there is no protection, or if there is like imitation of protection, then is considered one of the most sinful things, to create the sense of security temporarily, but actually to abuse that principle. And as you can see in Kali Yuga, this principle is abused so much, starting from the animals. Animals, they seem to get fed. There is now even in European law, and I guess it's also UK just left Europe, so it's gonna be here in UK too, that you have to entertain animals and look after them very nicely. Not just dogs, of course. Dogs been entertained now for a few decades, and that's quite common. You see, you know, that's quite a part of the culture throughout different societies in Europe. But also the other animals are supposed to be entertained. For example, according to the law, when I was visited Lithuania last time, my father actually works into this, or he worked throughout his life, or some periods of his life in kind of running and how you call it, like a farm type of situation. So he says, according to European law, you have to entertain pigs, you have to entertain, all different kind of animals that they feel happy. So on one hand, let's look after them very nicely, let them be happy and live with this nice, positive way of life, and have some good emotions. But what is the end result of that? You see, this is like a ridiculous thing in Kali Yuga. let them have a nice life, let them live this, get well fed, let them get fat. And you know, when the animal develops that trust and love, you know, there is some reciprocation because it's a sentient being. And then at the end of all of it, you cut the throat and sell it, you know, for some profit and money. So this is considered extremely sinful activity according to the Vedic literature. It's like a double standard, you know. On one hand, you like a looking and being very nice, but there is this heinous motivation of looking after, you know, let's promote the animal safety and happiness, and then at the end of it, cut the throat. So that's considered a very you know, horrible and sinful, and there's a lot of bad karma involved. And there is another, I think, a little video of Srila Prabhupada in Bhaktivedanta Manor when he is there on the grass, and this little kitten comes to him, and Prabhupada is laughing and is kind of with his finger is scratching its neck, and the cat is kind of doing what the cat does, like is it called purring or something? What the cat does? Purring. So the cat is purring, and Prabhupada is saying, you know, to look at this, you know, little cat has put, you know, full trust in us. So to excuse me, to you know, on one hand, take care of the cat, and that and the animal is putting the trust in you, and to abuse that trust is the most sinful. He says in that video, the most sinful activity. There's so much bad karma involved, and the same as well with government and leadership and etc. If you know, and this is the again symptom of Kali Yuga. If on one hand this declaration, you know, and promise, you know, vote for me, and I will take care of all your needs. I will take care of you, you know, and you promise this promise of various kind of social benefits, and you don't even have to work, and you'll be fine. You know, if you have no work, or actually nowadays, unfortunately, even if you don't want work, you're still gonna get something, you know, for survival. So all these promises are being made, and of course, it's in different countries, it's a higher degree of social care, and in different countries, lesser degree. But just the principle of promising everything and having actually a different motivation. So on one hand, you are feeding the chicken, but on the other hand, you are aiming to cut at the end its throat. So similar principle with the human beings. You know, let's look after them, or promise to look after them, and offer various kind of social benefits. But actually, the motivation, not in every case, but very often, is how to make the profit, how to profit out of all this, you know, human beings. And you know, as Adakshija was speaking as well about, when he was learning marketing, that you know, was looking at his marketing teacher was looking at these human beings and said, you know, who are these people? Anyway, I can't remember the exact words, but what he said, the gist of it was that, you know, we need to rip them off. That is marketing is all about. And of course, now we use the very beautiful language. At least the guy was kind of honest. But now they're using its very language, you know, fulfilling the needs of a customer. And the human beings are no longer called citizens or human beings, they're called customers. So we're using like a business terms, even in the sense of speaking about, you know, benefit of human beings. So let's kind of fulfill their needs. But actually, a lot of things that is being marketed, and I studied marketing myself at university, is how to create a desire in you. That is what this marketing is all about. And then we read in Bhagavad Gita that by contemplating objects of the senses, a person develops attachment for them. So marketing is how to expose you again and again and again to something that creates attachment in you, because it creates a contemplation. The various types of images, various types of language that is being used, is to provoke you to start to contemplate of what you are actually seeing. And there is a certain images for the senses, various types of senses, and sometimes even smells, to make you think about the object. And by that contemplation, attachment develops. And from attachment, kama, the desire arises. And then with the desire, of course, we can help you if you want it. This is the price. Come to our shop, or buy it online, and you get what you want. So it looks like it's fulfilling, your needs because you want it. We will give you this what you want, but actually the need is artificially created, and it creates this artificial civilization. We are, there is so many desires. You have to work so much, and it creates this unbelievable amount of industry to satisfy those things, and it becomes this very, very tough civilization where people are stressed out or frustrated or burned out, and etc. So and then there is this proclamation, yeah, we actually care for you. And then you try to deal with the consequences of that. If people get too depressed or frustrated and etc., then they don't work so well. They are go into hospitals, so there's a mental health problem, etc., and then try to deal with all that situation. So it becomes never ending. One problem creates another problem, and a third problem creates another problem, because there is not a proper care and there is not proper understanding of what is actually care. It's not just a physical thing, to get people fed. And that's why Krishna consciousness is such a wonderful thing, because it gives us a complete understanding of what actually looking after citizens means. It's not just give them some money, and then they're gonna fill their belly and they will be happy. We can see that is not the case. There's a various social structures, and even there's very socially minded countries in the world, like Sweden or Norway, Finland, where there is this like a very high focus on fulfilling people's physical needs. And some of those countries people are very, very depressed, despite of the fact that socially they're doing really well, but internally people often are very, very lonely. So to take a proper care, there's a number of things that are mentioned in the Vedic literature. One of them is that people have to be well engaged and fully engaged. They have to be active, not just that we promote, kind of give people money and encourage them not to work. And of course now it's not such a good thing to speak about communism or Soviet Union, but the one good thing that they did, and it's not many good things that they did, so I'm not saying that it's a good system, but one good thing that they did is that there was no unemployment. In fact, if you don't want to work, you could even go to jail for not working. So there was like a 99.7% of people were engaged and working. So that's one good thing, because idle mind, it's devil's workshop. So if you are unengaged, all sorts of things start coming into your mind, and actually a lot of complaints and the problems and etc. that people are expressing, or struggles and etc. And even some of the depression, not saying that clinical and everything is but some of the kind of depressive thoughts, or like problems that people face and etc. is because they not engaged properly and sufficiently. You have too much time, and even happens in a Krishna consciousness movement. If devotees are not sufficiently engaged, and it's a very important principle. But if it lacks that engagement, spending lots of time on internet, looking into various how you call it, conspiracy theories, and this person is not doing this, and a third thing, if another person is not doing this, and the temple president, the GBC, and leaders not doing this, but they're sitting behind computer doing nothing, just a fault finding. So that's not really gonna help anyone and not improve the situation. If you see there's a problem, then go and help out, try to assist, and the problem will get solved. Become more Krishna conscious. You become more Krishna conscious, you'll be able to help and solve the problem. So this full engagement, Prabhupada very much emphasized being fully engaged in service, and fully engaged in hearing and chanting, fully engaged in sadhana. So engage the mind always. Krishna says to Arjuna, engage your mind always. So it refers to the time, but it also refers to the different methods as well. All ways. So find as many ways to engage your mind. And if you're struggling to engage your mind, find somebody who can engage it. Ask for help. Prabhu, I'm struggling to engage your mind, and you will immediately, you ask your, authority in Krishna consciousness, and give you a big list to engage your mind always, always and always. You'll find easily engagement. So that solves so many problems, actually. If there will be more people engaged, and if you find that our mind is becoming too critical and etc., maybe our mind is not sufficiently engaged, and you should find some engagement. And that same thing works in every situation. So encouraging and promoting people to work is really good. And actually, there's some very good thing that government did, is called Kickstart program. I read the statistics. They engaged 150,000 young people. So there was 150,000 young people not working, and through this program engaged. And we also participated, and we also employed 4 young people, and there is still one of them is working. So it keeps people kind of out of trouble, sitting at home, getting depressed, and actually starting to do something. And a lot of problems get solved by doing that. So yeah, one is this full engagement, but this is not also sufficient. Another thing that we learn from the Vedic system is that, and this is what Varnashrama comes in, is to and is from the very childhood. It's supposed to be finding one's nature and propensity, and then engaging that accordingly to propensity. If you can engage in and find your profession, and we know in Krishna consciousness we connect that to Krishna, then there's gonna be a lot of more positive sense of consciousness and well-being. And that's again, if you're thinking about well-being of people, to engage in such a way, it brings better state and more positive state of consciousness and enthusiasm. And of course, in Krishna consciousness, we learn to go further and engage in a mission, and certain things will be not possible to engage in. You do whatever pleases spiritual master and may not be pleasing to the senses and may not be according to propensity. So that spirit we need to cultivate as well, especially when the temple is smaller, but as well as there are more and more devotees like living in a community and etc., then of course you know, if somebody is better at something, you would like to give them that service, maybe not in every situation, but there's gonna be like a more outcome if people are really good at something and they do this. There is gonna be you know, better productivity and also a certain higher degree of happiness, at least, you know, on the material level. But we know sacrificing in a guru's mission is the highest happiness for devotee, and this is our highest aspiration. But as we read in Bhagavad Gita, we study that there's various levels. There's a Sakama Karma Yoga, Nishkama Karma Yoga, and there's a pure devotion, which is the highest aspiration of devotees. So different people will be able to function on the different levels, and also at different times there will be different. So that's again, you know, expertise of a leader to find the proper engagement, encourage the sacrifice, going beyond one's natural propensity, and at other times going with it, and etc. So that's another expertise of leader and the care. And then again, so these are kind of more physical kind of side of things and psychological as well side of care. But we also speak about not only physical, emotional care, but there is also stimulation for the mind, and also there's a spiritual care, so that the soul develops a relationship with Krishna. So even if all those things are very nicely people engaged according to propensity, they're fully engaged and etc., still the soul will not be satisfied unless there are sacrifices that is being done in the service of Krishna, and there is this strong sense of connection, because living entity is looking for love, is looking for connection, is looking for relationship. And again, actually, just to go one step back, that's another important thing, is to have a loving relationships before we go into transcendence. That there is necessity and very important principle that relationships is emphasized, because if relationships are bad, that also affects your transcendence as well. There's going to be some offenses, there's going to be some you know, fault finding, there's going to be some feeling of maybe loneliness, and you won't be so absorbed in your sadhana. Because of that, your sadhana will struggle as well. So Radhana Swami says, you know, if you emphasize relationships, then the sadhana of devotees becomes better. Unless, of course, they're very advanced, then obviously it will not get affected so much. But with the advancement, of course, it comes as well this care and love and the relationships as well improve with advancement. But in Kali Yuga, people influenced with the mode of passion and ignorance, they really struggle with relationships. So that's you know, there's this difficulty in interaction, or you know, some problems come up, people mistreat each other, and etc., and that kind of affects and damages relationships, and again the well-being goes down. So therefore, to emphasize relationships and even create some structures for relationships to develop, and that is also very, very helpful. Create some sort of you know, events or gatherings or something, you know, like a various devotee care initiatives are there to bring devotees together and spend time together, take prasadam, hear and chant, and that is very, very effective. So that emphasis is very important as well. And then the spiritual care. So even if all those things are there, there's a full engagement, the relationships are emphasized, and people are, engaged in a certain way, and they go into various, they have some challenging service that kind of engages their intelligence, and you go out of the comfort zone, and etc. And you don't go too much into danger zone for a long time. So you balance things. But if there is a lack of connection with Krishna, weak sadhana, and etc., then that's also not sustainable. Is some sort of like a material structure. And of course, for example, Duryodhana, he was expert manager, so he was taking care of a lot of those things that we mentioned already, and things were actually going quite well in his kingdom on a material level. However, he obviously wasn't propagating Krishna consciousness in his sphere of influence in his kingdom. And therefore, that's not, even if other things are taken care of, it's not for the ultimate benefit of the citizens, because, they take another birth, even if everything is materially fantastic, still at the end of life, everything is lost. However, the ultimate care means how the person, the citizen, the subject can go back to Godhead, which means it's only possible if you develop love of God. So therefore, the ultimate care, a part of the things that we mentioned, is the spiritual care. And you need to take the leader, the government, hopefully in due course of time, to take responsibility for Krishna consciousness of the people that he or she is taking care of. So that's very, very significant, and it's difficult, of course, to give something that you don't have. So there's a great responsibility as well to be Krishna conscious and inspire other people in Krishna consciousness. So a strong sadhana, hearing and chanting, Srila Prabhupada so much emphasized the reading of the scripture. And again, creating some structure, because that's the thing, that's the difficulty, is speaking from personal experience, that, to structure time is not so easy, because the senses are pulling, one direction, another direction. You would go for some easy solution. If you got this time, you may just end up doing something else instead of reading and etc. So creating a structure or facility or something that people can come together and hear and chant, the discuss the Prabhupada's books from different angles of vision. Actually, there is a Scottish letter where Prabhupada is writing to Kishore. It says, make sure the devotees are reading and studying and discussing from different angles of vision, because it's very powerful. Actually, our realization, our collective realization deepens rather than individual realization, because of a certain mode of nature that we are influenced. We can often see from this one angle of vision, and in the discussion, that angle of vision broadens, and our realization and understanding broadens. And often, after a good discussion, you start to realize, wow, this is what actually Prabhupada means by this statement. I never thought about that. So we become, our horizons becomes broadened. So then that's becomes the spiritual care. It becomes a spiritual care, and therefore that is the complete system of care. There's this physical, emotional, there's some intellectual stimulation, and the spiritual development is there, because that's a very, very important point, that we perform devotional service and the mission and etc., and that is actually attracting the mercy, but the mercy becomes absorbed through our sadhana. The purification that is taking place is through actually hearing and chanting. So everything what we do is to develop this right consciousness, and when we in the right consciousness we chant and become purified, our relationship with Krishna deepens, And with that purified consciousness, when we serve, there is a lot of more presence of Krishna in our activity, and there's a lot of more mercy and empowerment, and also that's where the very powerful realization comes, that we're not a doer, because we can start doing better beyond what would be our natural psychophysical capacity, because Krishna is present in that situation. And there's a lot of magic starts to happen when Krishna's magic, because Krishna is ultimately Yogeshwara, is the master of all mystic powers. So Krishna's presence starts doing a lot of wonderful things start to happen. So are there any questions or comments about these points? Yes, Prabhu.
A question, if you could help understand, please. So, how to discriminate between religion and irreligion? How to understand what is religion, what is irreligion, the difference?
That's a very good question. So in Kali Yuga, there is some reference to the authority when we speak religion and irreligion. And in Kali Yuga, the authority is becoming more and more and more one's own mind and senses, whatever you feel like, whatever the senses are dictating, whatever your mind is dictating, whatever mode of nature you are in, whatever is dictating, that becomes your authority. And based on that authority, we can see it's not really working. So people more and more rejected authority. And of course, it's hard because, when we speak about this authority abusing its position, as we read in this purport, it's actually very sinful, and people lose faith and trust in this. And therefore, they mistrust and they start kind of putting the faith in other things, in their mind, senses, and etc. The cynicism, that's another thing that happens. It's very, very cynical. But by following one's mind and senses, often the situation gets even worse. Is reject, because the principle of authority is good and helpful, but if you reject it altogether and just fully trust your mind and senses, of course you have to discriminate, no doubt, but if you start basing the discrimination on just like whims, of the mind and senses, that doesn't work. So to be able to discriminate, and it's taught in Bhagavad Gita, good from wrong, you have to study the scripture. And that's another important thing of the study, is that we start to see, in each situation, we start to get an intelligence, what is right thing to do and what is wrong thing to do. And if you act according to what is right thing, according to this Guru, Sadhu, Shastra, the result is one. And if you not do it, the result will be different. And also the understanding evolves, certain things that devotees thought is actually Krishna consciousness. After a couple of decades of studying, they realize this is not exactly Krishna consciousness. And so the realization deepens, like we have so many now devotees who practice for 50 years, and their realization is very deep and powerful. They actually properly start to understand what Prabhupada meant when he said what he said. So there's a lot of better understanding with that. So of course we are going beyond what is just good and bad. We're looking of what is pleasing to Krishna. That is our ultimate understanding, but we also have to study very carefully in order to be able to discriminate between religion and irreligion. And Vaisheshika Prabhu was saying, because of the, you always studied throughout his devotional life, so many challenges, obviously comes in spreading Krishna consciousness. He said he always felt that he was able to get that intelligence, from Shastra, to be able to manage very nicely and, within the parameters of Krishna consciousness. So, any other questions or comments? So this is one of the very, very strong challenges for us to preach in this age, is that the cynicism and mistrust that people have in the authority coming, from this material world of abuse of authority, and is getting like a worse and worse and worse and worse. So therefore, it's such an important thing for us is to reestablish that faith people. So therefore, it's so important to study the scripture, develop devotional character and purification in our heart, so we can and study these great personalities like Lord Ram yesterday, Prithu Maharaj. It's not just some nice stories to read, but actually there's some eternal, powerful principles that are there. If applied, it brings phenomenal results. We just like scratching the surface, but if you really properly understand and apply, it's completely different. Result comes, and one of the results is that people gain faith. Then there is this reciprocation between the protection of the citizen, and the citizen puts faith in the authority, and there is this very beautiful growth that happens, in Krishna consciousness. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Nitai Gaura Premanande. Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki jai.